Good morning, campers, and welcome to Radio Camp Half-Blood.
I'm Zack.
I'm B.
And this is Radio Camp Half-Blood, a Percy Jackson read-along podcast. And you know what, B? You know what the weirdest thing about life is that fate has one of the weirdest intertwinements in the history of the world. And what I mean by that is there is an actual mere mortal that has walked both sides of the world of both Series of Unfortunate Events and Percy Jackson. That's kind of, in all honesty, it's kind of what made us together. Oh yeah, you too, B. But it's the idea of a person that, like, our dream jobs is this man's job both days, pretty much.
I wonder who you're talking about.
Yeah, I do wonder who I'm talking about. Why don't you introduce yourself, friend?
Excellent. My name is Joe Tracz, and I wrote the book for the Percy Jackson musical called The Lightning Thief.
Yes, and every one of our fans right now are just screaming because that's like the happiest thing, because we have so many people that ask us every day, we want you to review the musical.
Every day.
We want you to review the musical.
So
and
much.
It's like the greatest compliment that we could have.
That's awesome. I'm super happy to be on. I loved your podcast, and that the fact that there's a podcast devoted to going through Percy Jackson one chapter at a time is amazing.
Yes. B, how's that experience been for you?
I don't know a lot, because that's kind of the premise of our show, and it's a little weird, because in some ways I'm like representing the fandom of Percy Jackson, but also I'm like, by law, not allowed to read ahead of the podcast, so I'm kind of kept in the dark.
Is that like torture? You're like, I need to know what happens next, and yet you have to wait till you record the next episode?
Yeah, so if I finish the chapter for that week, I just have to stop reading, and it's this kind of reverse thing, because I was a literature student, so it's like I'm used to, feeling very stressed out that I have to read a bunch of stuff, and it's like, instead I just have this one chapter, and then I'm not allowed to go ahead.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk to you guys about the musical, because I feel like you probably know the details and the ins and outs of the books better than most people, just because you've spent so much time like thinking about it one chapter at a time, which is sort of like when you adapt something.
I don't think anybody's belabored it as much as we have.
No. I mean, I'm sure there's like a 12-year-old person right now just like furiously typing on the keyboard, I know more about Percy Jackson. What's his blood type? And I'm like, half-blood negative? It's like one of those things, especially like with our breed of B, they've spent so much time with like English, and for me, I've spent so much time actually with theater, musical theater. I was a stage manager for a couple years. So it's like almost interesting. It's like the match made in heaven.
That's
of
amazing.
Having Percy Jackson, the musical, and just having this tangible thing that's, how can you take something like one media and go into the other and like make it into something that's tangible? Because Percy Jackson's very like urban fantasy, very magical realism. How can you take that and then adapt it to our way of life and principle of having? Yeah, so there's dust and there's monsters everywhere. How is kind of one of the challenges with that, of just adapting one thing as a book to a stage play?
Well, it's funny because I definitely feel like every article about our show when it was first announced was skepticism and like shock that like, how could you make a Percy Jackson musical? I think on the surface, it's a middle grade fantasy series about Greek gods and their children, often illegitimate children, which feels like it's not a natural subject for a musical, because, I think musicals sometimes have a stigma of being sort of about old-fashioned stories, or, being, steeped in some sort of more realism. But, really musicals are about huge characters with emotions so big that they can't be contained in speech, but have to spill over in a song. I read a lot about teenagers, because I think that when you're a teenager, your emotions are so huge, because you're feeling things for the first time. You're seeing things for the first time. And I also read a lot of genre stuff like fantasy and sci-fi, because I love the way you can use metaphor to explore issues in a way that, if you treat it in a more realistic manner, might be tricky. You can kind of, to use a Greek metaphor, Trojan horse your way into something that feels real, even if what you're actually seeing isn't totally real. So I've always been drawn to stories like that, which is why both Percy Jackson and Lemony Snicket were things that I just have always loved. I'm a little too old to have read them when they came out, but I spent all of college working in bookstores and actually discovered Percy Jackson and Lemony Snicket around the same time, because it was that sort of post-Harry Potter wave of young adult middle grade series coming out. And so I would just read everything that came into the bookstore. And those two series were ones that just sort of struck a chord with me.
Yeah, there's this weird trend me and B have talked about, which is that after Harry Potter, everyone wanted to make the next Harry Potter. So a lot of books, especially YA at this time, was very Harry Potter centric.
Yeah, especially The Lightning Thief was like beat for beat very similar. Like if you look at The Lightning Thief, it has a lot of similarities to the first Harry Potter in like a lot of superficial ways, and we couldn't. It became like a joke on the show that we couldn't stop talking about Harry Potter like every episode. Like this is like Harry Potter in this way, because it's just like such a like baseline of like what YA was at that time. Do you have like a general interest in YA? Do you have like other books that you would like want to work on an adaptation of in some way? Because it seems to be like kind of the trend within your career that it's some sort of like YA middle grade book adapted either to a musical or a TV series.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely my passion. You know, like I said, I like writing about teenagers and I like fantasy, and you know, I feel like YA often is about both those things. So you know, Percy Jackson and Lemony Snicket have been two things I love doing. I did a musical called Be More Chill. That's another YA adaptation.
I have that in my notes.
Oh,
also,
cool. Oh, yeah,
like
awesome.
it's such a common thread in your career. I feel like it can't be a coincidence.
Totally.
Almost. We're kind of mirroring that in some way, because like I feel like everything I work on has to do with young adult fiction also. So it's like this weird mirroring thing happening.
Well, especially, you know, once you start surrounding yourself with that, then you end up, you know, like YA 24/7. But you know, I love telling those kinds of stories simultaneously. When I was working on Percy, I was working on Lemony, and I was working on Be More Chill. So it was these three sort of big YA, you know, in all genre. You know, Be More Chill is for people who don't know, it's based on a young adult novel by Ned Vizzini that came out in 2004 about a teenage boy in New Jersey who takes a Japanese supercomputer in the form of a pill that speaks in the voice of Keanu Reeves and tells him how to be cool. So
you don't see this now, listeners, because Joe and I are in the same like room. This is really weird. This is very alien technology right now of being in the same room talking to somebody. But the face that I just made, you might have just sold me on the elevator pitch.
The voice of Keanu Reeves. I didn't read too much into the premise of Be More Chill, but that's certainly something.
No, wait. Now this is my question. Is it like Keanu Reeves from Bill and Ted, or is it just Keanu Reeves as himself?
You know, it's sort of like Keanu Reeves as a personification of all things chill, but because the
so he's John Wick.
Yeah, you know, it sort of starts we describe it as like John Hughes meets John Carpenter. So it starts in this like very teen movie kind of place, and then by the end of the show, it's gone to this like full-on AI apocalypse. So, you know, it sort of starts in maybe more, you know, Keanu Reeves, John Wick, and then goes to like Matrix, crazy sci-fi territory. So if that sounds, if you like musicals and you like crazy genre stories.
I didn't even know this was a thing, and now I'm glad to see it.
We're going to Broadway next, we open on Broadway in February.
Oh.
Hey, I'm in New York.
Yeah, hey, so you should make a trip down and check it out.
Hey, B, I'll be on the next Pegasus over there.
Yeah, fly on
actually,
over.
It's very adjacent. Our director is the same director of A Lightning Thief, and George Salazar, who played Grover and Mr. D for us in the off-Broadway run, and is on our cast album. He's one of our stars in Be More Chill. So it was actually a lot of the same people who made Be More Chill that made the Lightning Thief musical, because we were making them simultaneously, and I love working with people who you want to work with again and again, because I think life is too short to work with people you don't like working with.
Have you always been into musicals in some way or another? Like, were you a theater kid in high school, or is this like more of a recent passion that you have?
Yeah, I was definitely always a theater person. You know, I was in theater and English in college. I went to an undergrad that was a super small liberal arts school. I was an English major, but because college was so small, I could do theater, which, you know, if you go to a bigger place, sometimes you don't get to do more than one thing. So I always sort of loved those things, but it wasn't until sort of the end of college when I discovered that playwriting was the natural sort of, you know, Venn diagram overlap between like being an English major and loving theater.
I do have a question, Joe, and that is, for me, I've tried to write a couple plays, a lot of one-act plays, and writing a play is really hard because it's not just, you know, you can write a story, but you have to really think about the big picture of what's the audience going to see compared to, like, you know, what you see backstage. What is kind of the challenges of writing, let's say, Percy Jackson and having with musicals, there's so many cues, there's so many different elements. What are some of the challenges of writing something as big as The Lightning Thief? Yeah,
well, I would say like one of the hardest things about playwriting or writing in general is the loneliness aspect of it, and you're spending so much time in your own head. You know, why I love theater, and especially musicals, and this is actually true for television as well, is that they're collaborative mediums. So, you know, when I write a musical, I'm working with a composer, lyricist who, you know, can sort of be that other voice to help pull you through when you're stuck in a moment, you know, to sort of help crack things open. You know, and same with TV, you know, Lemony was written in a writer's room, you know, so you have other writers to sort of share the group brain and to, bring different things to it and sort of help everyone keep the ball of story going forward, even when like one person might be stuck. So I love writing for theater and for television because I like not being alone on my computer. I like being in a room with other people, talking about story, and being able to sort of share that brain power.
Oh, yeah, because writing is a very lonely business because you'll sit there and you'll type and be like, man, this is all terrible. But then like 10 seconds later, like, man, this is really great. And then it's like that never-ending cycle, especially like when you take something, pardon the pun, when you take like a Herculean task, such as Percy Jackson, like when you could you maybe talk to us a little bit about how you were approached to do this and kind of like how did you prepare to this? Because Percy Jackson's a very huge thing, and I'm sure you wanted to be the part of like the Don't Fudge It Up committee.
Oh my God, yes! It's stuff. Percy Jackson fans, as you guys know from the movie, will let you know if you have
they'll let you know
something so beloved so poorly. There's a really amazing company in New York called TheaterWorks, and TheaterWorks is a company that does they do hour-long theater adaptations of books that travel the country and go to like schools and libraries. Like really you have like, 6 college-age actors, in a van with a stage manager and their set driving from school to school, bringing theater to people who ordinarily wouldn't be able to, get to New York to see a show. And so many like amazing actors and writers have gotten their starts working with TheaterWorks. They have an incredible reputation, and it was their relationship with Rick's literary agents, about doing an adaptation of Lightning Thief. As you guys probably know, Rick was very burned by the movie. And
he's the only author that I know that has an FAQ apologizing for how terrible the movie was, and it's like the weirdest thing.
And he sold the movie rights when he sold the book, so and that was a very different time. It was like sort of before the Harry Potter movies. So it was a totally different world in terms of Hollywood adapting books. And there was a sense that you take a book and you make it into something else to make it a movie. I think Harry Potter and how faithful it was and how much control J.K. Rowling had over that process, sort of changed the way Hollywood looked at adapting books, and realizing that being respectful to a source material is actually, the way to do it.
I would imagine it's also the same thing now, especially with Game of Thrones being so faithful.
Yeah.
And especially like having the stipulations of having like the author or someone usually it's like, even with Series of Unfortunate Events, they had Daniel Handler involved with that. Doing, in your writer's room, doing all these things.
I keep thinking about Harry Potter and how that kind of bred a specific like fandom culture of people having like an ownership of a story. And I do think that if you don't do justice to that kind of story, there's like a whole community of people who kind of go rabid about all of the little details that go wrong. I mean, even Joe, you said that the Harry Potter movies were accurate, but I feel like a lot of fans would be like, no, well, they left out this important character.
Where were the Marauders? They didn't talk about the Marauders.
No, exactly. I'm just saying like a person's like, I'm sorry, but like Peeves wasn't in there. And then they have like this Venn diagram. Like I think there's a Venn diagram for the Lightning Thief of like, it's just like this huge like war board of just everything they got wrong.
Yeah. Oh my God. I've done, and I definitely looked at those when I started working the show. So, TheaterWorks, because of their great reputation, they were able to get the rights to do an hour-long stage version of Percy Jackson that would tour the country with their other shows. It's run by an amazing woman named Barbara Pasternak, who really was personally invested in, making sure this was done right. And I think it was their reputation and passion that got Rick to be like, I'll let you do this. I happened to be visiting my agent and saw a copy of Percy Jackson on his desk and knew that having that book on his desk meant somebody was adapting it. And I was like, oh my God, I love these books. Please let me get this job. So, I actually at that point hadn't written a musical. I had just agreed to write Be More Chill with Joe Iconis. So I was a playwright who was sort of foolishly throwing myself into the world of musical theater. I wrote these plays that were like 15 character science fiction dance party plays. One of which was actually produced by a future Lemony co-writer, Josh Conkle. So it's sort of a weird connection there. But, I'd write plays that sort of were musicals without being musicals. And so, it actually wasn't that huge of a leap to start writing musical theater. But, so I was a job I really wanted. I really pushed myself for it. And I'm so lucky that TheaterWorks took a chance and saw I think they saw my passion as a fan of the books, and that I was someone who would want to adapt them respectfully. One of the first things that happened when I got the job was I got to have dinner with Rick and his son and his 2 amazing literary agents. Marietta Zacher and Nancy Galt when he was visiting New York for a book tour. And it was, it was actually it's the only time I've had face-to-face contact with Rick. There's a sense of him talking about his experience with the movie and, wanting to, not get letters from kids as he often does for the movie, being like, why did you let this happen? And of course, that must be so hard. I can understand as a writer, he had no control over the movie. He sold the rights before Percy Jackson was even a thing. And it was a time when people just didn't include the author in the process. So I can imagine how frustrating that would be. So, that was really his one condition. Also, include Clarice, include Ares in the fight on the beach, but, overall, what he asked of us was to make something that would make the fans happy. But, as a fan myself, that was also my goal because, I saw the terrible movie when it came out and it just so misinterpreted the tone of the books. I think everything was trying to be Harry Potter. And so the movie was trying to sort of fit a square peg into a round hole because even though Percy does have some DNA it shares with Harry, the tone of it is so different. It's American. It's funny. Percy is like, he makes jokes in a way that like Harry.
He's a smart butt.
Yeah, he's a smart ass. He's snarky, and Harry doesn't crack jokes in the face of danger.
One of my favorite lines is like when he jumps off the building. Is like, I fell to my death. I didn't have time to scream. I was like, this kind of sucks.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the chapter titles, and the chapter titles alone are so funny. And we actually in the musical we try to include as many of the chapter titles as possible. But, so I knew the tone would, to me, what I loved about the Percy books, was a tone, was Percy's voice, and I thought that was a tone that would live well on stage because, on stage you don't have the benefit of expensive special effects to make you believe you're, fighting a Minotaur or you're in a crazy Lotus hotel. But what you do have is imagination and a sense of playfulness. And I thought that sense of playfulness would translate well. When I had my first meeting about adapting the show, what I talked about was, to me, the emotional core of that first book is Percy on the beach with his mom, and because so much of that book is about him trying to save her, trying to bring her back, and in order to believe you get to go to fun, crazy places, you have monsters and gods and quests. But, I knew that like the heart of, in order to make it work on stage, you had to have the core of that relationship. And so, to get the job, I wrote a sample scene and I wrote that scene of Percy with his mom on the beach. And actually at that point we were talking about doing it as a play, but, I actually did write an early draft of Percy as a play, but it felt like so much had to happen and music is so good at letting you sort of shortcut to someone's inner emotional thoughts and also sort of get through a story in a really quick way. So we then looked at composers. And the composer, Robert Kiki, my collaborator, was recommended to me by the Be More Chill composer, Joe Iconis, because they play in a band together. So he was like, this guy's awesome. He should check it out. We had him write a sample song. And totally independent of what I did, he chose to write a song for Sally and Percy on the beach. And it was amazing because I knew as soon as I heard that song that he recognized that same emotional core that I did. And that song got him the job and is actually still in the show to this day. It's a song called Strong on the album.
Which is amazing when you have such great synergy, when everyone's really passionate about a project and they want to make it the best it can. As you look at the movie, which is just, we'll just make it, slap it on some lunchboxes and you go forward. And you can see both with the musical, because a lot of our fans tell us we really want to see the musical in its entirety before we listen to the album, because I feel like that would do it justice in the most complete sense. And that's one of the greatest things to hear is you take something like here is two opposites. You have most people like almost like scoff at plays, but it's like, I always want to see the movie first. But then when people are like, you should go see the play rather than watch the movie. Yeah.
I mean, it's been so amazing to hear from fans. And, because, so we did it like about 4 or 5 years ago as an hour-long show. It toured the country for a couple of years. It's, I think, on its last hour-long tour right now. And because the fan response was so amazing to the hour-long version, our secret dream was always to do a full big, off-Broadway show of it that got to, dive into the characters a little more in depth, got to include a little more story, because obviously when you're adapting a giant fantasy book like Percy into an hour-long show, that only stars 6 actors and has to be able to be packed up in a van, there are limitations. So because the fan response was so great to the hour-long version, we were able to get the rights. We actually had to sort of reapproach Fox because Fox held the rights to do Percy as a musical in New York. And through Rick and through, his team really stepping up to the plate for us and advocating for us, we were able to do it as a full-length show that we ran off-Broadway last year. And then now we're about to launch our national tour in January. So it's going to hopefully have a nice long life and come to a theater near you.
You mentioned that that emotional scene with Percy and his mom, you both kind of came to the consensus that there should be a song about that. Is that kind of your general approach to like where a song fits in a musical? Is it has to have some sort of emotional bearing, or it needs to be like a specific important scene? Like, how do you decide where music fits into the story?
Well, the trick in a musical, any sort of big emotional turning point has to be dramatized in a song because that's the form. So there were certain things that we always knew would have to be in music. We knew there'd be a song for the quest. We knew there'd be a song where Percy would express, his inner conflict, and we knew there. So you sort of read the book and you're like, this is a big moment, and a big moment in a musical has to happen during a song. Because I actually originally wrote it as a play, and then even when we were sort of breaking it apart to turn into a musical, often what would happen is I would write a scene that would then Rob and I would say like, well, where in the scene is a song, or Rob would write a song and we'd sort of say, where in the show does this feel like, here's this amazing song for Annabeth, where in the show is a moment where she reveals a side of herself to Percy. I went through so many copies of the book because I would just like dog ear it so much and like carry that with me that like my copies would quickly fall apart. So I like probably have purchased more copies of The Lightning Thief than maybe anyone ever. But just constantly going back and finding lines in the book and moments in the book that felt like, that was something that wanted to be a song.
Now, when it comes to like favorite moments of the book, you've talked about kind of, Sally and Percy on the beach. What were some of the other parts you're like, oh, I can't believe I get to write this? Like you like wake up and you get to your computer like, I get to write about vaporizing my pre-algebra teacher. Like whatever like one of your favorite scenes to actually write for the musical?
Well, my favorite stage direction that I wrote was the moment when Percy's just arrived at Camp Half-Blood and he wakes up and he sees, who he thinks is Mr. Brunner is actually Chiron, and Chiron reveals that he's a centaur. And in my stage direction for that, which I think is like indicative of the tone which all of us approach this, is Mr. Brunner steps out of his wheelchair and reveals he has the lower body of a horse. Have fun, director. Knowing that like that's something that you're never going to be able to do in a stage version the way you can do in a movie, but because of that you want to make that moment as like fun and playful and memorable as possible. So it was that was a tone of it, having a sense of humor even in the stage directions, which actually felt like a very Percy thing to write.
But seems like I feel like if you're going to write the stage directions for a Percy Jackson musical, you need to make them a little snarky.
Yeah, exactly. So we definitely have the snarkiest stage directions.
And then like the kids when they get it in their middle school, like have what are they trying to mean by that? Have fun.
Yeah, exactly. Be like, how are we gonna interpret this?
But then there's a really great. It's on Netflix. A really great documentary about this middle school that made The Empire Strikes Back as a middle school production. It's a very interesting play. I would imagine it's very similar to that. Like when you write it, do you keep in mind like maybe kids might be doing this one day? Like you have like actual like aged children?
Yeah, totally. And obviously with ours, we have actors who are in their 20s playing the characters just because, first of all, in the original version that was meant to tour, you're not going to be able to get 12-year-olds.
Oh, equity is hard.
And so equity rules. So, we do have amazing actors in their 20s playing the characters, which I know can sometimes be a deal breaker for Percy fans.
Oh,
yeah. Actually, it was amazing. Rick is tweeted today. There was a review of of Percy of the musical that someone did this morning that Rick tweeted that was amazing. That was all about how so often in adaptations of young adult stuff, what's prioritized is romance. And Percy, especially that first book, even though you have Percy and Annabeth, like their arc in that is from like not liking each other because of their parents to having a friendship with each other.
So, Joe, what have been some of your influences other than like plays and stuff? Like, what are your favorite authors? What made you want to be a playwright or just write stuff in general? Because writing is one of the most unique things because it's a very personal relationship, especially when you're reading a book. It's just you and the author reading the book. What are kind of some of the reasons why you became a writer?
I mean, so much of me wanting to be a writer was the books I read when I was a kid, so, I mean, Harry Potter, obviously, books like The Phantom Tollbooth that, were like played with words in such a cool, innovative way that sort of like blew my third grade mind. So, it was loving, young adult and middle grade literature growing up, and then obviously, studying theater and English and, having my minds open to, things like, playwriting like Tony Kushner or Carol Churchill and these playwrights that, often use genre or fantasy elements to tell these incredibly complex adult stories. But, but it's also like writers like Daniel and Rick that I've been lucky enough to get to work on their work and hopefully do it justice. Listeners may beg to differ. But, that I get to work with my heroes, which I feel hugely lucky to be able to like sort of translate my growing up love of these things into a career.
Oh, yeah, no, most definitely. I feel like there's a lot of things when it comes to like working with your heroes. There's a lot of like pressure because it's like I get to work with my hero, but it's like I want to make them proud, but they're my hero and I want to impress them.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, wanting to not disappoint them is a huge...
I can only imagine like working with Rick Riordan is a lot like you go to like a Mexican restaurant and he's like, yeah, would you like some more tacos? And like, no, Rick, I've already made you this beautiful nacho plate. Oh.
I mean, it's funny that Rick sort of has become my Poseidon, in that, I only met him in person at the very beginning where, he gave me his blessing, but also a warning.
Oh, no. So now I'm
blessing and a
in
warning.
My brain, I'm thinking about is like he started like going to a trance and gave you like this huge like prophecy and like, what does it mean? And he's like, oh, yeah. So I really didn't like the movie all that much. Oh, man, this food's so good.
You'll fail to save what matters most in the end.
Exactly. And we have a lot of communication with his literary agents who, he's really close with. And so they've been our sort of go-betweens, and then he'll also, blog or tweet about the musical. And whenever he does, it sort of feels like Poseidon noticed us. But, he's been really supportive, and especially the fact that fans have embraced the musical, as an adaptation that's respectful and faithful, which has been the thing that's meant the most to us.
So what's happening now in your life? What's been going on with just in general?
Yeah, so, we're super excited because we're starting our national tour of The Lightning Thief. We start rehearsals in December, and we start previews on January 8th in Chicago, and then have a big national U.S. and Canada tour planned. So if you go to lightningthiefmusical.com or thelightningthiefmusical.com, Google Lightning Thief Musical Tour and you'll find the answers. But, and we're casting, it's some of the people from our off-Broadway production, Chris McCarroll, who is our Percy, and Kristen Stokes, who has been our Annabeth since like the very first reading, are going on the tour. Along with some other folks who we have not yet announced. And then there's still a few roles we're about to cast for in 2 weeks. So if you happen to live in the New York area and your dream has always been to be in the Percy Jackson musical national tour,
I just show up.
Check the equity listings and come join us.
I'm destined to play Tyson or whatever. Well, no, that's the next book. But
the fun thing is in the musical, because, when we did the hour-long version, it was 6 people. When we made it a full-length 90-minute with an intermission, we added we were going to add 2 actors, but then we ended up just adding 1. So it is now 7 actors who play like the entire pantheon, all the, campers and Camp Half-Blood. So there's so much like, cross-casting and, gender-blind casting and people like making, I think someone counted, and our show has over 100 costume changes.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare. And you know what? If I could get the stage manager on there and to give him one piece of advice, I'd be like, if I can give you a hug right now.
Yeah, we have amazing stage managers.
Oh, yeah, no, that's like, for me, loved the stage manager. So if you listen to this, I love you with all my heart.
Yeah, and the dressers backstage who make sure that everyone makes their split-second costume change to get from Hades to Poseidon in 10 seconds flat.
Yeah, I was just thinking of how the casting process must be. You were talking about kind of doing justice to the Lightning Thief, and you have these characters that are pre-established in people's minds and hearts, and then you have to bring them to life. How does that? Do you just describe the character and hope someone shows up and can embody that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's crazy about our show is because it's 7 people. everyone's singing and acting and dancing and also fighting. Like our show has a ton of stage combat in it. So, there's a number called Put You in Your Place that's the Capture the Flag sequence that's sung, led by Clarice and Annabeth, with their teams facing off. And everyone's singing and everyone's fighting and everyone has their like weapons. And it is, and also like it's like a big like Joan Jett like rocker girl number. So it's like these like amazing actors are like belting their faces off. I think our Clarice called it scream belting. While you're doing this intent. I think so. When you listen to it on the album, imagine people like doing crazy fight choreography all over the stage as they're singing that song. So it's really it's a tough show for the actors. There's like traditional musicals that we have the leads who mostly act and sing, and then you have the chorus who dances, and then there'll be people with their own particular specialties. But because everyone's doing everything, we have to cast people who can act, sing, dance. And well, I guess our show doesn't have like traditional dancing. Yeah, so I don't know how many musicals can say that their auditions include a fight call, but our auditions always include a fight call, just to see how people can. So we've gotten a lot of people like gymnastic experience for Percy and people who can who can move their body in all the ways we do. The show it's sort of a roller coaster. It's because we're fitting so much story in. Certainly the 1 hour version felt like you were like on this roller coaster ride that just like never let up. And making it a 90-minute show with an intermission let us find more moments to breathe and spend a little more time with the characters. But it's an exhausting show to perform. I
didn't even consider like the gymnastic aspect of it or like the singing aspect. I just think of like casting as, like in a movie, you just need to kind of get someone who looks sort of like the person or like what you would imagine. But like that's so many layers of casting. Yeah, totally. No one has a stunt double. Everyone is their own stunt double in the theater.
Yeah, and if you mess up, the show will always go wrong, but you have to figure out a way to fix it.
Oh my God, yeah, it's fun, for following the hour-long tour, sometimes there'll be like, an actors get sick or is out, and they have to, like, I get the rehearsal reports from, or the performance reports for all the tour of the hour-long shows that are going to schools, and it's fun to see like when an actor's sick, like how the cast has to suddenly adapt, and you end up everyone plays even more roles than they normally do. So like, what is the Percy Jackson musical with 5 people or 4 people? And but the doubling is part of the fun of it, and because Percy is such a has such a sense of humor and wit and play and mischief. So we've part of our adaptation choice was to lean into that. So we're not trying to hide the fact that these actors are playing multiple roles. It's part of the fun of it, that you're seeing these people performing this incredible feat of character change right in front of you.
Now, with that, and this is a question that I have, is when you actually got to see the off-Broadway show for the first time, what was the moment that you just went, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life?
It was great. Well, opening night of our off-Broadway run was the same day as our table reads for season 2 of Lemony. And the way the Lemony table reads work. That's a busy day. It was a busy day. Is that we do like all the episodes for the entire season over 1 or 2 days. So it was like I heard like half of season 2 and then was like frantically checking my phone to see like how the opening night went because I couldn't be there opening night. I was there for the preview period. And previews, for people who don't know musicals, previews is when the show is running in front of an audience, but it hasn't officially opened yet, which means critics aren't reviewing it. And the creative team is still making changes every night. So, there were so many changes that we made in previews.
That reminds me of in The Cursed Child for the preview night, what they did is they actually have to have live owls.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, and they had to get rid of them because they were attacking people owls, in the audience.
Jesus.
Yeah, but God, I wish I'd seen that performance with the live owls.
I would have been like, oh my God. And then they all be like, oh no, don't attack me.
Yeah. Just swooping and like grabbing people's heads and stuff.
But that is the fun when you see a show in previews that you don't know what you're seeing, and that a song that is there one night might be totally missing the next night. For us, we I think all the songs stayed the same, but I know like Echidna, like we had so many different versions of how Echidna worked in the show. When you're looking at adaptation, we wanted to include as much from the book as possible, but also wanted to make sure every monster was furthering both the story of the quest and the story of the characters at the same time. So we ended up. Full-length show, there's a song called Drive. That's our sort of country twangy road trip number, that covers a big territory of the quest. And the song, it's like has that sort of road trip country feel to it.
I'm just thinking of Cars right now. Life is a highway.
Oh yeah, no, totally. It's like that. Yeah, exactly. And so that's that feel of so a lot of the monsters come in there. Medusa is not a song. Medusa is a scene that uses music in a sort of cinematic way to build tension. So we wanted to, each scene sort of has its own, feel to it. Each monster has its own fun thing about it. And because most of these monsters are like humans or puppets, there's also, a fun playful element to like Percy cutting off Medusa's head, and it's a basketball that gets thrown on the floor with a bunch of snakes glued to it.
That is beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for stopping by. We really appreciate it. Where can they find you if you're on social media?
I am on Instagram at Joe Tracz. It is the only social media I'm on, but feel free to find me on there, and I'll be posting stuff from rehearsals and our tour coming up.
Bless you.
Yeah, check out our tour, and also check out Be More Chill. I'm coming to Broadway next year. I should selfishly plug my next YA.
Oh, no, plug whatever
adaptation.
you need. Do you have any like bath products or anything like Medusa skin cream gets all that like cracky?
I mean, wouldn't it be great? Like, wouldn't it be a line of like Percy Jackson Greek god inspired products be amazing?
Oh yeah, no, like. Oh, we can talk about this forever, but it's just like a sea candle, or it's just something that's just really nice.
Yeah, scent of Poseidon.
Oh yeah, no, like one of my favorite shirts that I have. That's it's Poseidon, god of the Brocian, and it just shows like a really ripped Poseidon. It's
amazing. I feel like a Poseidon scented candle would smell like a Jimmy Buffett concert.
No, it'd be like a Margaritaville.
Yeah,
it'd just smell like a margarita.
Totally. It'd smell like a margarita. It would actually just be a margarita.
Oh, what is secretly? Poseidon is Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah.
But thanks again, Joe, for stopping by. We really appreciate it. Where can they find you, B?
You can find me on Twitter at bkelleygorman, and you can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com.
You can find me on Twitter at Suda41, that's SUDA41. If you want to follow our show on Twitter, that's at halfblood_radio. And if you want to email our show and send us any iris messages, you can email our show at radiocamphalfblood@gmail.com. Thanks again, Joe. Well, I'm Zach.
I'm B.
I'm Joe.
And keep staying mortal.
Bye guys.